For the first time in months, Emma allowed herself to feel something other than sadness. Each day, as Rex slowly gained strength standing on shaky legs, taking short, careful steps, Emma felt her own heart stitching itself back together, piece by fragile piece. Daniel started visiting more often. He brought takeout on cold evenings, wine on restless nights, and even a squeaky toy for Rex, who was still too weak to play but wagged his tail at the gesture. They spent hours talking on the couch, watching old movies, sharing laughter that felt strangely like a distant memory but somehow still real. And yet, something gnawed at Emma's heart. There was a hesitation in Daniel's eyes, a nervousness in his touch. She told herself it was guilt over the way he had left her, guilt for hurting her. And perhaps that was true. But deep down, her instincts whispered something wasn't right. One night, after an unusually warm dinner filled with soft smiles and tender glances, Daniel excused himself to take a shower. Emma poured herself another glass of wine and returned to the living room where Rex lay peacefully by the fireplace, his breathing steadier, his eyes brighter than when she first found him. That's when she heard it, a soft buzz. She glanced over and saw Daniel's phone lighting up on the kitchen table. A message appeared on the locked screen. Emma froze. She wasn't the type to snoop. She wasn't the type to invade someone's privacy. But her heart pounded painfully, her hands trembling. As the screen lit up again, this time with a name she didn't recognize and a line that burned itself into her brain. Miss you already. Last night was incredible. When can I see you again? Her breath caught in her throat. Ice flooded her veins. The room tilted, and for a moment, she felt as though she might collapse. No. Number no. The sound of running water filled the felled house as Daniel showered, unaware. Emma stood there, frozen, her heart thudding violently in her chest. She wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. She wanted to believe she was overreacting. But the words on the screen told her everything she needed to know. He was seeing someone else, even as he sat at her table. Even as he kissed her. Even as he whispered that he missed her, he was lying. Her hand shook uncontrollably as she put the phone back down, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She swallowed the lump rising in her throat and forced herself to breathe. When Daniel emerged minutes later, smiling as he toweled off his damp hair, she plastered on the best neutral expression she could manage. "Everything okay?" he asked, casually, coming toward her. She nodded, her voice barely steady. "Yeah, everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. Something inside her had shattered all over again. That night, as he fell asleep beside her, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her body stiff, her heart cold. She could hear the soft rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his skin brushing hers. But the distance between them felt like an unbridgeable canyon. Rex, sensing something, stirred at the foot of the bed. Emma slid her hand down to touch the dog's head, her fingers brushing his soft fur. His eyes, golden and gentle, met hers in the darkness. "Looks like you're the only man I can trust," she whispered bitterly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Rex pressed his nose into her palm, a quiet gesture of comfort she hadn't expected but desperately needed. The next morning, Emma knew she couldn't keep pretending. She moved through the house like a ghost, her heart aching in ways she thought she'd already survived. Daniel kissed her forehead before leaving for work, unaware that the fragile threads of forgiveness he'd been weaving were already unraveling. She sat on the porch afterward, Rex lying beside her in the sun. She ran her fingers through his fur as the weight of reality settled over her like a suffocating blanket. Daniel had betrayed her again. This time, it wasn't just her heart on the line. It was her dignity, her self-worth. The choice between falling back into a toxic cycle or finally, truly breaking free. And deep in her gut, Emma knew This wasn't the end of the story. Not for her. Not for Rex. Somewhere in the distance, the winds of change were stirring. And Emma Reynolds, once broken, once abandoned, was about to rise. But before she could move forward, the full truth of Daniel's secret would have to come to light. And that truth would change everything. The first few days after Emma brought Rex home were some of the hardest of her life. The dying German shepherd could barely lift his head, and every breath he took seemed like it might be his last. His fragile body trembled constantly, and his weak eyes barely opened even when she spoke to him. But Emma didn't give up. She stayed by his side day and night, setting alarms to wake every few hours to feed him warm broth with a spoon. She gently cleaned his fur, whispered soft words into his ear, and sometimes, when the house was completely silent, she just cried, her fingers resting lightly on his thin frame. She wasn't sure who she was saving, him or herself. With every small improvement, a tiny tail wag, a weak attempt to stand, hope flickered in her heart. Hope she thought she had lost forever. Then, one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the horizon, she heard the sound that made her chest tighten. The doorbell. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. "Hey, Emma," Daniel said softly. Her ex-fiancé stood on her doorstep, hands buried deep in his pockets, eyes full of something she hadn't seen before, regret. She froze, her heart pounding. The last time she'd seen him, he had broken her, left her without explanation, without closure. And yet here he was, standing under the fading light like some ghost from another life. "I heard about the dog," he murmured, glancing past her into the house. "And I don't know. I guess I've been thinking about everything. About us, about what I did." Emma's throat tightened painfully. She didn't know whether to slam the door or fall into his arms. "You can't just show up," she whispered. "You can't just pretend nothing happened." "I'm not pretending," he said quickly. "I messed up. I got scared, Emma. I thought I wanted freedom, but when I walked away I realized I lost the only thing that actually mattered." She didn't answer. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her screamed. To run. Then Rex whimpered softly from the living room, drawing both their eyes. "Can I come in?" Daniel asked gently. After a long moment, she nodded. Inside, the air felt thick with unspoken words. Daniel knelt by Rex, his expression softening. "He's beautiful," he murmured. Emma swallowed hard. "He was going to die in a cage. I couldn't let that happen." Daniel looked up at her, his eyes locking onto hers. "You've always had the kindest heart," he whispered. She hated how those words made her feel, how they brought back the warmth she'd buried so deeply, how she still remembered the way he used to hold her, how he made her laugh until her stomach hurt. They sat together for hours, talking softly as Rex drifted in and out of sleep. They reminisced about silly memories, the time they'd gotten lost hiking, the night they danced in the rain. Laughter came easily, unexpectedly. So did the tears. When the clock struck midnight, Daniel rose to leave. But before he did, he paused by the door. "I miss you, Em," he whispered. "I miss you, S." And then he did something that shattered her already fragile heart. He leaned in and kissed her, slow and gentle. It was familiar. It was safe. And for just one fleeting moment, it felt like everything could go back to the way it had been. When he left, Emma sat in the quiet, her fingertips still brushing her lips, confusion tearing her apart inside. She wanted to believe people could change, that love could heal, that broken things like Rex, like her heart, could be made whole again. But deep down, something didn't feel right. As Rex stirred beside her, his soft eyes watching her with quiet understanding, Emma pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "I don't know what I'm doing, buddy, but I think you might be the only one I can trust right now." The night stretched on, silent and heavy. Somewhere in the distance, the first seeds of betrayal had already been planted, and Emma's heart, already cracked and fragile, was walking straight toward another storm she couldn't yet see. Emma Reynolds never imagined her life would fall apart so completely. Just 3 months earlier, she had been planning her wedding, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, dreaming of a future filled with love, laughter, and a family. But all of that shattered when her fiancé, Daniel, came home one evening, his eyes distant, his words like knives. "I can't do this, Emma. I'm not ready." That was it. No explanation. No second chances. Just cold, heartless words that left her standing in their shared apartment, clutching her engagement ring in trembling hands as the man she loved walked away without looking back. Since that day, Emma had drifted through her life like a ghost, empty, numb, and profoundly alone. She stopped meeting friends, stopped answering calls, and worst of all, she stopped believing in anything good. One chilly afternoon, with nowhere in particular to go, Emma found herself wandering down the quieter back streets of the city. Sun was low, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The world felt as hollow as she did. That's when she saw it. An old cardboard sign leaning against a broken fence. The letters were shaky but clear. "Sick dog $1 or free to good home." Something about the words made her stop in her tracks. A few steps closer, and she saw the animal. A frail German shepherd, barely more than skin and bones, lay curled in a dirty crate. His eyes were dull, lifeless, his fur patchy and matted. It was clear this dog was dying. An elderly man sat on a wooden chair nearby, his expression one of exhaustion and quiet sadness. He barely looked up when Emma approached. Is he yours?" she asked softly. The man sighed. "Was. Can't care for him no more. He's too sick. Vet said he doesn't have long." Emma swallowed hard, her heart pulling painfully in her chest. She knelt down beside the crate. The dog lifted his head, barely, his eyes meeting hers for just a moment. And in that fleeting glance, something stirred deep inside her, a flicker of life where she thought none remained. "What's his name?" she asked. "Rex," the man murmured. "No one wants a broken animal." The words echoed painfully in her mind. Broken, unwanted, words she knew too well. Before she could stop herself, before logic or fear could take over, Emma heard herself say, "I'll take him." The old man blinked in surprise. "You? What?" "I'll take him," she repeated, standing. She fished into her coat pocket and pulled out a single crumpled dollar. Her hand shook as she held it out. "I'll take care of him." The man's eyes softened, and he nodded slowly. The exchange was simple: $1, one leash. But to Emma, it felt monumental. It felt like the first real choice she'd made in weeks. The dog Rex barely had the strength to stand. She scooped him into her arms, her eyes filling with tears as his fragile body rested against her chest. His breathing was shallow, but he didn't resist. "Thank you," the man whispered, almost as if speaking to the heavens. Emma didn't answer. Her throat was too tight. The drive home was quiet. Rex lay curled on the passenger seat, too weak to move. But every so often his eyes flickered open, and he would glance at her, those deep, soulful eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sadness. When they arrived at her small house, she carefully carried him inside, laying him gently on a pile of soft blankets. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't even know why. But she knew she couldn't walk away. Not from him. She made him broth, feeding him with a spoon. She cleaned his fur with gentle hands. She sat beside him on the floor, speaking softly, tears slipping down her cheeks without permission. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. "You're safe now. I don't know what's going to happen. But you're not alone." As the night deepened, she lay beside him, her fingers resting gently on his fragile paw. For the first time in what felt like forever, her heart ached. Not just for herself, but for something beyond her own pain. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the beginning of something that would change everything.